Paige, wait.
What the hell were you thinking?
I don't know, that's a really good question because I've been driving myself insane, making a complete ass of myself.
Drama. There's been drama in the JavaScript and TypeScript communities over the last week. You see, DHH, the man who invented Ruby on Rails, the maintainer of the Turbo 8 JavaScript framework, has dropped TypeScript from the framework. And he's not the first one to do this. And now all these people are running around opining, is this the death of TypeScript? Is TypeScript even worth learning in 2023? Well, as an experienced professional, let me weigh in on this whole situation and maybe give it some color for beginners. Because what you're going to find is that there's a lot of people out there who are very loud. And they don't represent the larger community. They're just very loud. And social media platforms give them a voice, and it amplifies their voice. And then we end up with these situations like this where beginners are getting their heads turned around. And hopefully I can help with that today. I'm Eric Wise from Skill Foundry, where we teach people to code the right way. So it all started with this blog post, and DHH put it out there. Turbo 8 is dropping TypeScript, and he goes into some of the reasons why he's doing it. But what it really boils down to is typed versus dynamic languages. And you'll find in the developer community that there has been kind of a holy war since the beginning of time on which type of language is superior to the other. And again, my stance is always languages are just tools, and whatever tool does the job well for you is the tool that you should use. But this is what DHH is really trying to say here. And he says, TypeScript gets in the way of that for him. It requires an explicit compile step, and it pollutes the code with type gymnastics that add ever so little joy to my development experience and frequently considerable grief. Now, this is true. I'm going to tell you as somebody who knows TypeScript, if you are a framework author and you are trying to build TypeScript into your complicated framework, there are some things that TypeScript makes very difficult. And that's because you're trying to force a type structure on a language that is not strongly typed. And that requires some gymnastics, especially on the framework side. And there's a type in TypeScript called any that you can use to get around this. And it feels like failure when you're a developer and something is so complicated to implement that you're just like, screw it. I'm just going to put any type in there and we're going to get on with our lives. Now, that point aside, type systems have some significant benefits to consumers of software and large teams. That's because in type systems, you have to fully describe what you are doing, what exactly you are returning, what properties and members it have. Those things have to be set up front. So it requires a rigorous specification and planning phase. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because if you're a beginner or you're a consumer of somebody's framework, you're not going to be intimately familiar with all the things that are in that framework and how they work and what data types they're returning. And when you have a strong type system and those things are defined, you get lots of goodies in your modern IDE. You get checks, you get real-time IntelliSense and documentation that pops up, and it helps you use the framework and its members in the right way and makes you more productive faster than you would be if you had to go in and research how the things were actually working, what they're returning, and how they're built. Now, the criticism I'm going to level at DHH is that he pulled this out of his framework and he did not put in a replacement. So now everybody who picks up this framework is going to have to read the documentation while they're writing code and look at the code and go into the code and try to figure out what's happening in certain situations. And TypeScript or JSDoc or any other type of hinting replacement would prevent that from happening. So as a framework author, he really did a disservice to his community by removing a feature and not putting in a replacement. And the thing I want to impress upon beginners and early career coders that follow my channel is that this is a common theme in technology, especially in the open source movement. A framework gets adopted, a technique gets adopted, people go on iterating through it, improving it, and then someday, inevitably, somebody jumps the shark, they make some changes, the community doesn't like it. You can go look at all the drama that's happening in the community around this, just do a Google search. And then people start abandoning things, and they start forking projects, and then you get fragmentation. And now instead of all these really smart people rowing in the same direction, you've got the smart people all working on their own different flavors, and then we have to wait and see which one is going to win. Because when you're an enterprise developer, you don't want to have to rewrite your code very often, especially because some framework gets abandoned or it changes in a way that breaks backwards compatibility. That is a real pain in the butt. And it's always been that way. And that's why the year of the Linux desktop has never happened, because the Linux community can't just get together and pick one or two distros and make them user-friendly so that it's a true desktop replacement. It's never happened because you can't get all these people to work together. So as a beginner, don't really sweat about this. I mean, is TypeScript going to die? Who knows? I mean, there's frameworks that are dropping it right now. It's still very popular. Google uses it for Angular. I don't think it's personally going anywhere. It's still worth learning because a type system is really important at scale. The larger your project, the more different skill levels of developers who are touching that code, the more value you get out of types and things like that, because it makes them more productive and it prevents them from doing the not so smart things that inexperienced and poor developers tend to do. So to bring things back full circle to learning and development and beginners, this is just another example of why I rated JavaScript so low on the stability part in my comparison of programming languages video. You see, these types of things happen every couple years in the JavaScript community. Frameworks come and go. And if you're somebody who's trying to learn to code for the first time, these sorts of things can be very disruptive to your learning experience, either because they stress you out and they make you kind of get analysis paralysis on what you should actually learn, or something that you did learn and get comfortable with falls out of favor, and now you've spent a lot of time learning something that isn't really valuable. And that's why I always encourage beginners to start with a more stable language, your C-based languages, Java, C++, C#. These languages, the core of them does not change very often, and when you start learning them, you really focus in on the fundamentals of the language and the syntax, and you don't really get into using frameworks until later in the journey, because so much of the stuff in the language is available right out of the box, and it doesn't change very often. So my advice, reading Hacker News and Reddit and things like that, those are all fun little distractions, but just remember that there's a couple million programmers out there working professionally in the field. And there's a couple hundred comments at most on a lot of these posts on social media. And just be mindful that social media is an amplification tool for a small number of people. And you really shouldn't be making learning decisions or pathway decisions based on a post on a social media site. Pick a good language that has a lot of job opportunities. And I've identified a lot of those in my programming languages ranked video. And then do the research in your area, figure out what's in demand in the companies and the regions that you want to work, and then pick a language and just dig in and focus on the fundamentals. You really don't need frameworks to start learning the core part of a language. They don't come till later. And when you get there someday, you will have an opinion, and feel free to jump in and join the flame war with the rest of us. It's fun, but you're not really going to change anybody's minds. But hey, if you need to while away an hour being a keyboard warrior on the internet, feel free to do that. But early on, just focus on those fundamentals, ignore the noise, and you're going to be a much happier coder.